Congratulations, we've made it this far, and welcome to the last math swag of the year. Woo! Reflection time. In Google Classroom, please view the responses from last swag by clicking on the Responses link. Which were your favorites? Which ones could really help? Please push pause and add your thoughts in the class comments section below. Now it's time to reflect on what went well for you over the last 6 weeks. Click on the What Went Well link.
This is the last unit for kindergarten. It's Unit 6. Your 3 focus are coin identification, personal financial literacy, and then an overall review. Coin identification is 5 days, and it's a K.4. It's identify coins in order to recognize the need for monetary transactions, including pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. And the text there, the verb is identify, and in that case, the students don't need to know the value of the coins. They just need to be able to identify the coins. And the importance here is to recognize, like, a lot of our coins now have different fronts and different backs. So you need to make sure that that you're bringing in different types of coins where they can see different fronts and backs on the coins. And then talk about now what the color of the coins are and how the edges are, so that even if the coins fronts or backs are looking different, that they can still be able to identify the coins maybe by a different attribute than the front or the back. So are the edges smooth or rigid, or if it's a copper coin or a silver coin, the size of the coin maybe to be able to identify it other than the front and the back. The next 4 TEKs are the K.9 TEKs, and these are the personal financial literacy TEKs. You'll spend 10 days on these, and a lot of these you might have already touched on in social studies. The first one is A, identify ways to earn income. The second one is differentiate between money received as income and money received as gifts. List simple skills required for jobs. And then D is distinguish between wants and needs and identify income as a source of need. As a source to meet one's needs and wants. And feel free to bring in social studies resources if you have them. There are resources in your lessons, but these certainly cross curriculum very easily. And you're just being able to identify, differentiate, list, and distinguish. So the verbs are lower level here, but at the same time that kindergartners will struggle with being able to do these with these personal financial literacy. But the bulk of the 6 weeks is just 17 days of review. And when you're looking at your one pager, the last bullet, it tells you what the primary focus areas. And we're talking about counting, the order of numbers, and understanding addition and subtraction as separating and joining, and then comparing objects by the measurable attributes, and that's weight, capacity, and length. And then when you're looking on the learning plan, when you go all the way down, there's some different types of lessons from teacher-created materials that have been dropped in. And one of the tasks...
Hello, Irving ISD math teachers. It's Tasha Hofert, your elementary math coordinator. First, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to participate in our virtual swag session. Let's talk a bit about the concrete pictorial abstract progression. Concepts need to be introduced through hands-on experiences with manipulatives. This is very important as you plan your daily math block. As you are choosing learning activities for any part of your math block, choose concrete task first. Then, when your students are ready, move them on to the pictorial phase. It's important for our students to know that a pictorial model helps us to make a mental image of the concrete that we've been using. With this progression, students should have enough context to understand an abstract task. So if your students are struggling with an abstract task, that tells you that you need to take them back through the progress. Thank you.
In the learning plan, here in the review previous text, you're going to see some teacher created materials, and these are all dealing with K.3 A, B, and C, which is your adding and subtracting text. You're going to see lesson 18, how many in all modeled. And when you click on the link, you're going to open up to a folder. And in the folder, you'll see a PowerPoint folder, a student guided practice folder, and a teacher guide. And when you open the PowerPoint will open, and you'll see a refocus PowerPoint. You can choose to use this depending on the needs of your classroom. And it'll just walk you through some vocabulary and then just some examples that you might want to use with your kids to get them refocused on the topic. It has pictures in the examples, and it also has the student guided practice book, which I'll reference in a second, about that you could use with these examples. I would also encourage you, even though it's not necessarily specifically asking you, it is referenced on the student guided practice book. If you choose not to do that, always use a part-whole diagram and have them write a number sentence with all of these. That will help them walk through their thinking a little more clearly. And then one thing I do like about all these refocus is they have these sentences at the end to help them write it. So these would also be good for by statements too. You could use either of these for by statements. So they will always have a PowerPoint. Then they'll also have a student guided practice and teacher's guide. And the teacher's guide kind of follows very similarly to a 5E model. It kind of goes through your learning objectives, progress monitoring. These are the pages that are included in the student guided practice. One thing I really like is the kind of teacher's background. So you kind of should glance through this and it'll kind of give you an example like, what are my students struggling with? Why might they still have some problems with separating and joining in these adding and subtracting problems? And then it just goes through the problems, and you can pick and choose what parts of these that you want, or you could use all parts, and you don't necessarily need to do all these parts on one day. You could chunk it to go across the course of a week, and you could do these like as part of the whole group lesson for the course of 3 or 4 days. So all of them have a warm-up, all of them have a language and vocabulary. There's a whole group lesson part, and this says 40 minutes. You could chunk up the I do, we do part to do for 2 or 3 days. And then they have the whole group. They have some progress monitoring. And then at that point, if you feel like your students still need some more help, then they have a refocus part. That's where the PowerPoint comes in. And again, you can kind of see here where you may or may not want, you may want to do more with your kids. You may need to do less. This whole unit, this whole part of the unit is based on what your kids need at this time. And here I want to get down to the bottom of this lesson because these sentence frames, again, are a great place for you to find things for higher order questioning. And it's also a good place to find for writing your by statements. So that is kind of the teacher's guide. And then I also wanted just to take a quick glance at the student pages. And these are just the pages that would accompanying all the pages in the teacher's guide. But you can see, like in this case, they all have part whole models. They tell you how to write the total. Here they're writing out the word 8. Sometimes they'll have the numbers. You can see here how many in all. Sometimes they're joining. Sometimes they're separating. Here they have pictures, so you can differentiate instructions based on if the kids need the pictures or if they don't need the pictures. So there's a lot of good resources here. You can also see how there's a lot more resources than you may need at that time. So you can choose to scaffold it as you feel necessary. But I just wanted to make sure that you saw that these are available here at the Review Previous TEKS. All of these have to do with understanding addition as joining and subtraction as separating. And use them and scaffold them as you see fit the needs of your class. When you're going to have the 5 days of talking about coins, your text is going to be identifying U.S. coins by names, and you're going to be using the coins, pennies, nickels, and dimes. And now that we have so many different coins that have different backs and fronts that we need to be able to have the students identify them by more than just the backs and the fronts. So when we're doing that, we need to think about what is the color of the coin, what's the shape of the coin, and is the edge of the coin smooth and ridged? And then start talking about the front and the back of the coin. What are the different fronts of the coin and what is the different back, so that the kids have something to rely on other than is George Washington on the front or is Abraham Lincoln on the front. So every time that during the 5 days that we're talking about the coins, make sure that you're saying, okay, what color is this coin? Compare and contrast. Is this coin larger or smaller than the penny? Is it larger or smaller than the nickel? Is it larger or smaller than the dime? Because especially with the dime, they want to say that they get confused because it's so much smaller than the other coins. Then talk about the front and the back so that they can start to identify that. And a good way to do that is to create like a 4 or 5 way T-chart so that you can start to compare and contrast the color, shape, front and back, and then the edge of the coin, and so that they can kind of start to use that to compare and contrast visually. In the small group stations, there is a matching coin game that is from Everyday Math, and the purpose is just for the students to be able to play this independently. You will need to create cubes where there's coins on heads and tails of coins on the cube, and then the kids would roll the cubes, and then there would be a tray of.
Take this moment to relax. Just think, in a few months, you could be at the beach. Please click on the triangle, square, circle link to complete this course. Congratulations.